Well, sure. I think that if you drive interest rates down to zero and all the countries print money like crazy, it's lifted the asset boat for everybody. And I think it really is. So they didn't have anything else to do in the Great Recession, and so they took the only weapon they had and used it aggressively. I don't think we should quarrel with that. It did cause the people who were already rich to get richer, but that wasn't done on purpose or anything like that. And I think that will correct automatically.
Do you think we should still be using that weapon aggressively?
I am so afraid of a democracy getting the idea that you can just print money to solve all problems, and eventually I know that will fail. Singapore, which has a marvelous economy, has zero debt. If I were running the world, I would like the United States to be in that position. That is not the typical, that's nobody's position. No, all these politicians in Europe and America have learned to print money. Who knows when money printing runs out of control? And at the end, if you print too much, you end up in something like Venezuela.
You're not suggesting that happens anymore?
No, but I don't like the idea. And both parties, you have politicians say, what we learned is we can print all the money we want. We don't have to raise taxes, we just print. If interest rates are going to go way up, you can obviously have a lot of deflation of stock prices. And a lot of that happened in the American period you're talking about. What's interesting about Japan is that I don't think anybody thought that a major modern Keynesian democracy pervaded by a good culture in terms of engineering, product quality, product innovation, and so forth, could have a period where you would have negative 13 years without major depression either. I think that it would occur while interest rates were going down, not up. I think that was so novel that the models of the past totally failed to predict it. But I think these anomalies are always very interesting. And I think it's crazy for Americans to assume that what's happening in Argentina and what has happened in Japan are totally inconceivable forever in America. They are not totally inconceivable.
You had a huge bubble in equity prices in Japan, and now you've had interest rates go to virtually nothing. You've had the passage of time. The country hasn't disappeared. People are going to work every day, and you've had the Nikkei, now at a third of what it sold for not that many years ago. It's an interesting phenomenon.
And huge fiscal stimulus in the whole period from the government.
Post-bubble periods, I think, depending on how big the bubble is, and how many were participating in it, but post-bubble periods, I think, can produce fallout that not everyone will be terribly good at predicting.
When you throw money, when you print money on the scale that modern nations are printing it, Japan, the United States, Europe, etc., we're getting into new territory in terms of size. The Japanese bought back not only a lot of their own debt, but a lot of their common stocks. So the Federal Reserve System, you can't imagine how much money printing Japan has done. And they haven't had all that much inflation, and it's still a very admirable civilization. In fact, you could argue that Japan is one of the more admirable civilizations in the whole world. And in spite of all this very extreme government money printing they've done, and they haven't had terrible consequences. Now they've had 25 years of stasis with living standards not improving very much. I don't think that came from their macroeconomic policies. I think that came from the rise of tough competition for their export powerhouse from China and Korea. But at any rate, it's weird what's happening, and nobody knows for sure how it's going to work out. I think it's encouraging that Japan can print as much money as it has and remain as civilized and calm and admirable as it has. And so I hope to God the United States has similar happy outcome. But I think the Japanese are better adapted for stasis than we are. I think it's a duty-filled, civilized bunch of people, a lot of them older, not many young people, and they just suck it in and cope. In our country, we have terrible tensions. It's way harder to run a country which is not mono-ethnic like Japan. There's some professor at Harvard that has written extensively on this subject. It's way harder to run a nation like the United States with different ethnicities and groups and so forth than it is to run Japan. Japan is basically sort of a mono-ethnic civilization which is proud of its ethnicity, and of course they can cope with the troubles better than some other people can.
Negative interest rates make me very nervous. However, I don't think the authorities had much choice. It's politically impossible to do big stimulus rapidly, and the only weapon they had in a crisis was to print money and change interest rates. And I think it was probably the right thing to be done. Of course it makes me nervous. I think having worked once, people will overdo it. And that's the nature of governments and people. And of course that makes me nervous. I don't know what to do about this. I am made uncomfortable with the idea of extremely low interest rates, or negative interest rates, even more extreme, lasting a long time. I don't think anybody knows how those will work. If you are a little uneasy, welcome to the club. I think it's dangerous and peculiar. But I think we had to do what we did. In other words, I don't have any good solution for you. I think you're right to be worried about it.